Hello there, you are listening to The Screen Queen, where you'll be finding your favorite movie or your favorite television show and learning something new. You'll just have to listen to find out. Here is your host, Samantha Parrish. Hello there and welcome back to The Screen Queen. For the third episode of Alien August, I have a title that it had to happen. You think I'm going to do Alien August and not talk about aliens? So the Alien series has been on my mind to try and land this on the show, and if I had to do it, of course I'd have to start with the best one of them all in so many more ways than just being an amazing film. Like, this thing hits so many check marks that nothing else can keep up with this movie. And to think that this is just a sequel from a film that felt kind of standalone. When you look at films, it's hard to think of how can you masticize the scare factor the next time. Well, James Cameron said, "Hold my beer." Not only was this a successful sci-fi film and another good checkpoint marker from James Cameron, it set the bar so much that none of the other Alien sequels did well until Alien Romulus came along. So I have a lot to dish about this sci-fi messiah, so let's not waste any time to get into aliens. So I think a good chunk of us know the man responsible for this movie being a really amazing sequel from something we didn't think was going to have an amazing sequel, James Cameron, who, I mean, you could throw a dart or be blind and deaf and still know that this man is responsible for a chunk of the 80s, 90s, Titanic, Avatar, T2. I mean, do I have to name any more titles than some of the most iconic films? But when it's the 80s and you're first kind of starting out, you don't really know how things are going to go. Even Fox wasn't sure if this was going to be a hit, not knowing it was going to be their most successful one, and it would still be cherished for years and years and years to come. But at the time, the team that he wanted was the same team that made Aliens, because you can't walk into an established film without having the people who established that film. And even getting the good graces from Ridley Scott saying, "Hey, you do you, boo. Don't fuck it up." The team, however, did not have the same faith that Ridley Scott did. So a big reason why they were worried is because they knew James Cameron for the Terminator, but the Terminator did not do well in the UK. So they based it off of that being not successful in their country. They wouldn't want it successful for the US if it wasn't going to be successful in the UK. So James Cameron tried to make a fresh start. He even invited the original British crew to watch The Terminator again to kind of get a better feel. You know, you need to watch something a couple more times. And did they show up? No. And it proved to be a rough first start for James Cameron and his then wife, Gail Ann Hurd. And since they were married at the time, you know, they worked together, but unfortunately, most of the British crew kind of saw that as just automatic favoritism, that, oh, well, you listen to her because you're married to her, when realistically they are both professionals in their own jobs and they don't doctor being married to take away from it. They're still going to hear out what is much needed for this to be a successful film. But the divided feelings and assumptions made it extremely difficult for the both of them to work with the British crew. Now, the US and the UK used a place called Pinewood Studios for their production, which is also notably where Blade Runner, another Ridley Scott movie, was done. And James Cameron learned firsthand about how this experience with Pinewood Studios would be the most frustrating thing. He would tell the crew that he thinks often about having to just leave Pinewood and never come back. But if he did that, then there would be no aliens. But eventually, when the thing was wrapped up, James Cameron did not return to Pinewood Studios. One of the things that was also a pain in the film that I want you to think about every time you see this is tea time. There were strict policies on some of the help that James Cameron got, and one of the things was mandatory breaks. So they have all these set designs, and they already have Fox breathing down their neck going, "Hey, this is a lot of money that you're using for this set. What's going on with the movie?" And he's like, "Gonna have to wait until after tea time because we have mandatory breaks and we have no way out of it." And many people had recalled when they were working on some of the most gut-wrenching scenes, and then there's a little lady with a trolley going, tea time, like, that just kind of takes you out, like it's a Mad TV sketch now. So every time you see that xenomorph, T had to come before the xenomorph. But despite the problems that James Cameron had with the British crew, there was one member that was a true homie, and that was Peter Lamont, who had a major part to play in his future productions of True Lies and Titanic. Even though everyone does an amazing job in this movie, from Sigourney, of course, Bill Paxton, Carrie Henn, Paul Reiser and his Reiserness that was so good that his sister slapped him for being such a horrible character. William Hope is great. Jeanette Goldstein, I forever quote, have you been confused for a man? No, have you? It lives in my head rent-free. Al Matthews, who was originally a Marine. And of course, Michael Biehn and the unfortunate Terminator curse, but thank God this film did not touch him. But Lance Henriksen, man, the work that he's done is severely underrated. Not only did he do a great job as Bishop, but this man is also the reason why the Terminator exists. This was the film that the UK did not like, that it flopped, didn't do well. People did not want anything to do with James Cameron because of the Terminator and its, up and down thing. But Lance Henriksen was the one that made that possible. He dressed up like the Terminator to show an idea of what had to happen because he believed in James Cameron. So imagine 2 years later when the same guy that you helped make the Terminator happen asks you, hey, do you want to play a robot for this? And at the time, Lance Henriksen was heavily considering quitting acting because nothing was coming through. It didn't feel as sharp. It didn't feel strong. But when his good pal James called him up, it was a different story. And despite taking this, he did know that this could not work. It could flop still. But he made a promise to himself that if this film did not work, that he would quietly retire from acting. And clearly, that did not happen because this man is still going strong. To think of the first Alien film, where you had Ian Holm as Ash the robot that turned out to be a fucking traitor, and it does pave the way for Alien Romulus in a fantastic way. But having the introduction to Bishop, being a character that you're not supposed to trust because you saw what happened to Ash, and they automatically don't like him, and he knows they automatically don't like him. To be someone who knows he's not liked, but is still going to help. There's another alleviated element, just like the way we would eventually see the Terminator end up saving John Connor. Well, this is kind of the first time we had that happen before Terminator did it. But there is also a bit of a military additive as well. I'd mentioned that Al Matthews, who plays a Marine sergeant in the film, was the first Black Marine to be promoted to a sergeant in the field of, service in Vietnam. Lance Henriksen is also a U.S. Navy veteran, just like his co-star Al Matthews, who was the first Black Marine to be promoted in the rank of a sergeant in the field service during Vietnam. So, what more could you ask for to have characters that truly do emanate what has to happen here? By putting everything that they know, putting everything that they know belongs here, you're never going to find another sci-fi cast that truly makes us feel believable because of their experiences that they put into this movie. It's crazy. I'm surprised Lance Henriksen actually isn't a robot, because this man can do no wrong, and he just keeps going. I love a lot of his movies. I loved him in Pumpkinhead. I loved his little bit on Hannibal. I loved him in the film No Escape. He has never not done a film wrong. And if the film was wrong, he's the only right thing about it. Okay, so I'd be a fool if I didn't give a spotlight to what is essentially the best part of this film and a historical icon that got females more representation in the action industry, our sci-fi female messiah, Sigourney Weaver. This woman not only changed history to have female representation, but because of her contribution for this specific version of Alien, led to her return in Alien Resurrection with a higher salary than the entire cost of the first Alien. They knew if you want the best, it has to be Sigourney Weaver, and it must cost more than the first movie. And another tidbit about her that I didn't realize and never knew is that Sigourney Weaver is very anti-gun. Well, look at what she's gotten there is basically a futuristic firearm. But because she worked with James Cameron on making sure things worked well for a character, and James Cameron was so happy to oblige. He already has the British invasion that, invades with tea time. So to have someone who is keeping the story set, keeping it alive, making sure everything is going good, that whenever they do have these minor production hiccups, there is someone who is actively making sure that this is a great movie, and that is Sigourney Weaver. To put it in perspective for how important she is, her performance as Ellen Ripley for this specific installment is ranked as number 58 in Premiere Magazine's 100 Greatest Performances of All Time. For a film that came out 40 years ago, that is a pretty damn strong placement. And even though Sigourney herself has had some ups and downs with the way the Alien came through, Aliens is no doubt her Terminator 2 before Terminator 2 came out. The fact that she still wanted to make sure this was a strong character because of the introduction we got the late 70s that cemented her as a female action icon. Ripley is known here for more as the crazy lady that puts her on the oddball out than the oddball in. But they gotta make sure that angle is done in just a way that you still trust your heroine, because we all know in some sequels your hero can go through some hiccups. And Sigourney was not about to have that. And she's not trying to be a bossy pants about it, but she cares too much about this character just to let things slide like that. It's a true love for the craft. It's not every day that a character you play twice ends up on 1001 movies you must see before you die. One big part to thank for this movie is definitely going to have to be given to NEWT. Even though NEWT isn't the only great thing about this movie, but it is one of the unsuspecting additions to the sequel that you normally wouldn't want to think about. You've seen what the xenomorph can do to a whole crew, and you don't want to think what it does to a child, and that movie invites the idea. It is not the first time we've seen a child in a horror film, but this is a whole new level of child endangerment. But outside of the film, the actress that plays NEWT didn't feel she was in the danger that her character was absolutely in. Everyone on the crew did a great job making sure that she was taken care of. Most notably, Bill Paxton, who she fondly spoke about, that he was like her big brother on set and would stop and play games with her or draw with her, so that way she had some company, because she knew the adults were talking adult stuff, but she had to just be in her area, and Bill Paxton wanted to make sure that she was not alone. And the dynamic with Sigourney Weaver is still just as strong, and said that she still does talk to her alien mommy on a very good basis. One cool thing about the set design is that not only is it from the same set that is used in Alien, because James Cameron wanted to make sure that the same song and dance could happen in the familiar dancing spaces. And, it probably doesn't hurt to reuse some stuff, and James does know his way around a set or to get a set and set it right. But because it's a great set, it was making Fox feel very uncomfortable. So, Gail Ann Hurd, one of the unsung heroes of the film, and Fox had asked, so is the money being spent on the special effects? Because we're seeing it just spent on the set, and we really need to know if that's what's going on. So she said yes, they are absolutely being used for special effects, which made the artist feel very comfortable knowing that they could keep doing what they're doing and that they basically fooled Fox. And it's funny considering this was a lot riding on a film that people weren't sure was going to happen because the editing was still a little incomplete, and when they did test screenings, there wasn't a warm reaction. They're like, I don't know if this Aliens film was going to be great. I don't know if it's going to be in 1001 movies you must see before you die. But turns out, this was the film that saved Fox. The future success that paved the way. Now Alien films have set the bar permanently the past 40 years. And that's all from someone who just had to do what he could to get around tea parties and Fox breathing down his neck. But not only was it successful, but it did earn the praise of the original artist of Alien, H.R. Geiger. And if you have never heard of this man, he is the reason why Alien looks like the way it does. And when you hear about a sequel coming up to a movie you made look so good, there was a little bit of worry wondering, is it going to be as good as the original work? or continue, or is it going to fall flat? I mean, he did hear that a lot of money went into the sets that Fox wasn't supposed to know about, so he knew what was going on, and his comments are very beautiful. Geiger called the film designs and execution beautifully done, that the queen looks great, and he commented, "I like the fight at the end very much. The alien queen is very complicated, like the way I would have done. I like how she moves, and the scenes with Ripley are very good." Now, if that doesn't sound like a thumbs up, I don't know what does. But this set was also used for another famous movie in the 80s, Batman! So I figured the best way to wrap up this episode is to talk about, well, the most iconic scene from the film that there's no way I could get away without talking about, the alien queen versus Ellen Ripley. Now, having that be an introduction to Ellen Ripley being in a mechanical suit about to fight it, that is the shit we were waiting for. We knew there was going to be some way to top the first film, and yeah, everything else has done a great job, but that is the pinnacle. So I thought I'd do some research into seeing how did they make that happen. The P5000 power loader is built using a practical life-size mechanical rig that's operated by a stunt coordinator with a tandem operator setup with scale miniature rod puppets and mannequins. And at the time, because of this being a huge suit, if it wasn't being interrupted by tea time, there's only maybe a handful of times in that scene that they had to throw a mannequin in there if they needed to keep Sigourney Weaver safe. But for the most of it, that is Ellen Ripley just kicking ass. Nothing could go wrong with that scene. Again, if it wasn't being interrupted by tea time. But the fact that they were able to make that happen despite the British setbacks and despite all the drama going on, they made that work. And I do have to admit, it was funny when they brought it back with Sigourney presenting at the Oscars and looks right at Grogu and goes, "Get away from her, you bitch." Like, not the same, but I'm also glad that she did a callback. You know, what can I say that hasn't already been said about aliens? But I will say this. I'm glad this is the movie that got me to give the Alien series a second chance. But I knew if I had to get into it, I had to start with one of the most iconic ones of them all, and I'm real glad that I did. This got me involved into Ellen Ripley's survival, but not only hers, but the survival of the others. The tension is so tight that not even a tight walker could be able to go through and navigate what they had to go through behind the scenes and on the scenes. Everything came together in such a unique and marvelous way that is truly the stuff that inspiration for sci-fi is made of. This is one of those sci-fi messiah films that I often quote, because where would we be if we didn't have a certain film? Where would we have sci-fi if we didn't have aliens? So that is going to be a wrap for the median episode of Alien August. This has been a fantastic series so far, and I'm glad I got to cover one of our most famous alien films, but we're not done quite yet, and I got another fabulous pick for the 4th episode of Alien August. But until then, you can catch up with me in between uploads at the Queen of the Screen on Instagram. And also recently, I'm sure most of the Screenies have seen that I jumped back onto the YouTube game, and I have been creating a new lore series. The first one was about the Looney Tunes, and I hope y'all check it out. There is an audio-only version that I released last month. And of course, you can always find me on different apps like Apple, Spotify, Amazon. I'm sure eventually there might be a Screen Queen app, so you're just never going to be able to escape the Media Queen. I'm sorry and you're welcome. But until then, you all take care, stay amazing. This is your Screen Queen, signing off. Bye-bye!